Welcome back. And now with the news in detail. Pakistan says the United States and other countries should keep a watch on spoilers of peace in Afghanistan. This follows the killing of 27 people in the first major attack in Kabul since the signing of the Doha Peace Accord last month. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the attackers of the Kabul ceremony don't want peace. He said the spoilers are present in and outside Afghanistan. The Afghan Interior Ministry said the event was being attended by several high-profile officials when it was attacked. It said Chief Executive Abdullah managed to escape unharmed. The Taliban have denied the responsibility for the attack. President Ashraf Ghani said it's a crime against humanity. Meanwhile, Taliban say they have killed 8 Afghan policemen in an attack on a security post in northern Balkh province. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said 7 others were wounded in the overnight attack in Nahar Shahi district. The fighters said they seized ammunition and weapons in the raid. Kabul has neither confirmed nor denied the claim. This is the second such attack by the Taliban after signing the Doha deal with the US last month. Ashraf Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah have announced to hold parallel swearing-in ceremonies as future president of the country. The Election Commission declared Ghani the winner of the September 2019 polls 5 months after the elections amid accusations of electoral fraud. But Abdullah rejected the results, saying he has won the majority and will form an inclusive government. The Kabul government says the preparations for President Ghani's oath-taking ceremony were completed and the event will be held on March the 9th. Meanwhile, Abdullah's office says he will assume the role of president on the same day. The oath ceremony was scheduled for last month, but it got delayed after the US expressed concerns that the political turmoil might jeopardize their peace deal with the Taliban. Washington has backed Ghani's victory in the elections. In Tunisia, a policeman has been killed and 5 others wounded in a double suicide attack outside the US embassy in Tunis. Police said the attackers blew themselves up when they were stopped from entering the embassy. In a tweet, the US embassy urged people to avoid visiting the area. Tunisia's tourism sector is highly vulnerable to militant incidents. Scores of visitors were killed in militant attacks on a beach resort and a museum in 2015. Moving on to the US, which says it is encouraged by an agreement on a ceasefire reached between Moscow and Ankara. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkey's Tayyip Erdogan agreed on a ceasefire in Syria's Idlib after a 6-hour meeting in Moscow. The State Department said the US is hopeful that the truce will help de-escalate tensions in Syria's Idlib. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also expressed hope that the latest ceasefire will end fighting across Syria. After the meeting in Moscow yesterday, Erdogan said both Turkey and Russia will work to make the ceasefire in Idlib a lasting one. Erdogan said the 2 countries will ensure aid reaches the Syrians in need. Putin said he has agreed to continue working with Turkey on Syria as per the Astana format.
As a result of our negotiations, we have agreed on a joint document which will be read by the foreign ministers. It includes the solutions which I and the Turkish President Mr. Erdogan developed during today's consultations, which lasted for over 6 hours.
EU countries have called for the implementation of the Turkey-Russia ceasefire deal to protect civilians in Idlib. Foreign ministers from the 27 EU states welcomed the deal as they held talks in Zagreb to discuss the Syria crisis. They also urged the warring sides to allow in more humanitarian aid. The EU has announced $68 million in humanitarian assistance for northwest Syria. However, EU's top diplomat Joseph Borrell said the bloc will not accept refugees being used as a bargaining tool. Earlier, Netherlands called for a no-fly zone in Idlib to stop any further bombings of hospitals. Dutch Foreign Minister Stef Blok said European countries should be willing to take steps on implementing a no-fly zone. The minister said he is hopeful that the UN Security Council could be convinced regarding the zone. Turkey and the EU have continued to antagonize each other over Syrian refugees problem. Ankara, which already hosts near 4 million migrants, says it cannot handle another wave of asylum seekers stemming from the Syrian civil war. Thousands of displaced Syrians are stranded at the border with Turkey. This report has more.
Syrian migrants in thousands are camped at the buffer zone with Greece. Thick barriers obstruct their access to Europe. Turkey wants European countries to share the migrant burden, accusing them of trampling migrants' rights. The war-weary displaced Syrians have no place to go, but they still hold on to hope of entering Europe.
We have been waiting for you. Just give us a permission, please. A permission, for God's sake. For Christ's sake. For Christ's sake. We just need to cross the border peacefully. Peacefully.
According to International Organization for Migration, more than 13,000 people gathered along the border. Rain and chilled winds have compounded the misery for displaced Syrians as they are struggling to find a shelter.
All we hope for now is to go back to our country. We don't want to be humiliated and embarrassed like this. We just want to go back home, because when you leave your country, you become humiliated.
The Turkish Red Crescent has provided bags of food, water, basic shelter, and medical support to hundreds of asylum seekers.
We are witnessing many violations of the human rights, many violations of the migration rights, and we are expecting and claiming to protect their international rights.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan have agreed on a ceasefire in Syria's Idlib. Only time will tell if this would contribute to resolving the complex issue of Syrian refugees.
Well, thousands of people took to the streets in Afghanistan and Bangladesh against the killing of Muslims in India. In Afghanistan's Herat province, protesters raised slogans against Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's anti-Muslim policies. In Taga, a big protest was held against the maltreatment of Muslims in India ahead of Modi's visit on 17th of March. Protesters attempted to march towards the Indian High Commission but were stopped by riot police. Yesterday, 12 people were wounded in a similar protest on the southern island of Hatia. Dhaka has come under criticism for sending an invitation to Modi. Opposition parties have strongly condemned the violence against Muslims in India. In India, the Uttar Pradesh police have put up several pictures of anti-citizenship law protesters across Lucknow city. Risking their safety, UP police also unveiled names and residential addresses on the billboards. Police allege individuals identified on the signposts incited violence in the city. Many of the accused mentioned in the hoardings were earlier granted bail by a local court. Parts of India, including the capital New Delhi, have seen violent protests over the citizenship law, which discriminates against Muslim minorities. 47 protesters were killed during last week's riots in Delhi. Moving on to China, where for the first time, no cases of new coronavirus have been reported in Hubei province outside the capital of Wuhan, where the disease originated. China's National Health Commission says all 126 new cases in the province were in Wuhan. Elsewhere in the world, the fatalities continue. More in this report.
The new coronavirus has infected over 97,000 people in more than 80 countries. In China, 143 new cases have been reported, with 30 new deaths, taking the toll to 3,042. Britain and Switzerland reported their first deaths from the outbreak, while Bosnia and South Africa confirmed their first cases. The World Health Organization has warned that several countries are not doing enough to fight the outbreak.
We are concerned that some countries have either not taken this seriously enough or have decided there is nothing they can do. We're concerned that in some countries, the level of political commitment and the actions that demonstrate that commitment do not match the level of the threat we all face. This is not a drill.
Saudi Arabia has reopened the Great Mosque in Mecca after it was closed for sterilization. The kingdom also suspended the year-round Umrah pilgrimage. Meanwhile, Salvador's health workers are applying disinfectant at the international airport in an effort to head off the novel coronavirus.
This liquid is to be applied as protection against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and certain elements that may at some point generate complications. It is also important to emphasize that it is effective against coronavirus.
Canada has announced 9 new cases, bringing the national total to 45. In the US, Congress has voted for an $8.3 billion emergency funding package to fight the coronavirus as the death toll rises to 12.
China's aggressive measures to contain the novel coronavirus has changed the course of a rapidly escalating epidemic. The World Health Organization has confirmed the slowdown in the number of cases in China. President Xi Jinping himself visited the medical center where the patients were being treated. But the path to containment outside China is sure to be rocky, and no one is predicting when the outbreak might end. Iran has reported 17 more deaths from the new coronavirus, rising the death toll to 124. The health ministry says the total number of patients jumps to over 4,747 after another 1,000 people diagnosed positive. A few key Iranian officials have also lost their lives after suffering from the coronavirus. Among the latest is the advisor to Iran's foreign minister, Hussein Sheikhul Islam. All schools and universities will remain closed until 20th of March. The UN rights chief says governments using lockdowns to fight the deadly coronavirus must ensure that people's rights are respected. Speaking in Geneva, rights chief Michelle Bachelet said the response to the disease must place human dignity at the top. She said lockdowns, quarantines, and similar measures should always be carried out in strict accordance with the human rights standards. Bachelet said she understands the need for a range of steps to combat the virus. The epidemic has reached almost 90 countries, wreaking havoc on international business, tourism, sports events, and schools. Iraq has long relied on tourism revenue from foreign pilgrims visiting its many shrines, but the country has been losing this business because of the violent anti-government protests raging in the country since 2009. Now the coronavirus outbreak has made things even worse. What in this report?
Until last year, Najaf was a bustling city with a thriving hospitality industry. Today, there isn't a single foreigner or pilgrim in sight. To control the coronavirus, Iraq's government has banned foreign pilgrims from entering the country, effectively shutting the local economy down.
All life is at a standstill, not just hotels. Hotels are dependent on foreign tourists from Iran, Pakistan, India, and the Gulf. But right now, everything is frozen. Not just in Najaf, but also Karbala and the whole of Iraq has been affected by the coronavirus.
4,000 people working in Najaf's hospitality sector have already been laid off from their jobs. But things have been deteriorating since before the virus scare. In October, news that 500 people had been killed in violent anti-government protests scared off pilgrims from neighboring Muslim countries. With unemployment rising further, these demonstrations could intensify.
In total, some 4,000 people working in the hospitality sector have lost their jobs, but also in other sectors, because when a hotel doesn't operate, other services automatically don't have any work.
The crisis has been exacerbated by the country's political vacuum. On Monday, caretaker Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi announced he would no longer be performing most of his duties. Tourism is a key industry in the cities of Karbala, Baghdad, and Samarra, which are also home to holy shrines.
It's time for a short break. I will be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The City of London Corporation has revoked an honour granted to Aung San Suu Kyi over the treatment of minority Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. Elected representatives on the body running London's historic centre and financial district voted to revoke the freedom of the city granted to Suu Kyi 3 years ago. Officials said the decision reflects the city's corporation's condemnation of humanitarian abuses in Myanmar. The move comes after Suu Kyi's appearance at the International Court of Justice in The Hague in December. Suu Kyi defended Myanmar at the highest UN court against allegations of rape, arson and mass killings of Rohingya Muslims. In January, the ICJ ordered Myanmar to prevent the genocide of Rohingya people in Rakhine. The EU says serious differences remain between the bloc and the UK after the conclusion of the first round of trade talks. The bloc's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, said difficult issues have to be resolved, but a good agreement for both the sides is still possible. He said competition rules, police cooperation, and deal enforcement remains contentious. Brussels insists on keeping EU standards as a reference point in the trade agreement, but London calls it a dynamic alignment by another name. Both sides set out their respective positions in opposing strategy documents last month.
In this first round, the British tell us that they always have this ambition of a high standard as we have it ourselves, but there are two difficulties. The British do not want to translate these commitments into a joint agreement, nor do they want appropriate mechanisms to ensure respect of it on both sides.
Talks moved to London later this month for the second round. In the UK, a police officer has been arrested on suspicion of being a member of a banned right-wing group with links to terrorism. In a statement, police said the serving Metropolitan Constable is a 21-year-old arrested in North London. Police said the case has been referred to the Independent Office of Police Conduct and the officer's status is under review. The UK Home Office has been increasingly active in banning right-wing groups since last month. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has accused the opposition of trying to destabilize the country, calling it unacceptable. At a meeting with the leaders of Russia's Federal Assembly, Putin said the government needs to guarantee that the country develops further. The president said Russia should return to the 1990s and efforts should be made to stabilize the government. He said many members of the assembly witnessed the events of the 1990s and he hopes that nothing like that will happen in Russia. In the 1990s, Russia went through an enormous economic, social and political shock. The state attempted to rapidly adjust to the global economy after the end of the Soviet Union. Turkish Coast Guards have rescued 130 migrants and refugees in the Aegean Sea. Majority of the stranded people are Syrians and Afghans. The rescued migrants were aboard the 3 rubber dinghies. This happens when the Greek Coast Guard teams pushed back the boats to Turkey. The migrants were trying to reach the Greek island of Lesbos. So far, more than 1,700 people have disembarked on the Greek islands in the Aegean Sea. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says the US Middle East plan, the so-called deal of the century, is a stillborn plan. In an interview, al-Assad said Washington's Middle East proposition was made only in time for the next US elections. The Syrian president said those elections will be held at the end of this year, so the idea is meaningless. Assad pointed out that states and the governments, even those allied with America and Israel, have rejected the plan. Speaking on Syria, Assad said several foreign companies have found ways to invest in Damascus despite Western sanctions. In Pakistan, the death toll from a 5-story building collapse in the port city of Karachi has risen to 18. Rescue services said 2 more bodies were taken out from under the debris of the collapsed buildings. The residential building had fallen on 2 adjacent structures, bringing them to the ground as well. In order to avoid more damage to life and property, officials ordered for nearby buildings to be vacated. A case has been registered at Karachi police station over the collapse of the building. Pakistan's legendary comedian Amanullah has passed away at 70 after a prolonged illness in Lahore. He was suffering from multiple medical complexities such as lungs, kidneys, and breathing issues. The versatile stage, film, and TV actor entertained at least 3 generations with his particular style of spontaneous comedy. He performed over 2,000 stage plays in a career spanning some 40 years. The actor was married thrice and leaves behind 14 children and a sister. Prime Minister Imran Khan has expressed deep sadness at Amanullah's death. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In India, 13 people have been killed after a car rammed into an SUV on a highway near the southwestern district of Tumakuru. Police say 5 others were injured in the accident, which happened when the driver lost the control. Officials say the car was approaching on the wrong side of the highway. They said people traveling in the SUV were from Hosur in Tamil Nadu. Police say they have opened an investigation. A Virgin Media database breach has affected 900,000 people as their data was left unsecured and accessible online for 10 months. The company says the breach was not due to a hack or a criminal attack, but because the database was incorrectly configured. It said the data did not include any passwords or financial details. The firm was alerted to the problem after it was spotted by an independent security researcher. Virgin Media Chief Executive Lutz Schuller said the company immediately solved the issue by shutting down access. Indigenous people make up to 2% of Argentina's population of 43 million. They are limited to far-flung areas of the country where water pollution, unhygienic conditions and malnutrition are killing indigenous children. Let's look at the situation in this report.
Argentina has around 18 different indigenous groups who remain invisible in mainstream society. Most live in remote parts of the country where they are deprived of life's basic necessities. This includes the Wichi community, who suffer from lack of clean water, availability of food and pollution. 8 of its children have died within the last month. Local hospital beds are filled with children battling malnutrition and other health issues. Hospital authorities say malnutrition is not the only issue. The children are also suffering from diarrhea.
There are children that have problems. They have diarrhea, they vomit and lose weight. There are times that they are taken to Tartagal and recover there, but when they return, the problem returns because of the water. This is not safe water.
The community also has one of the highest rates of infant mortality in the country.
The place they use as a water source is already either contaminated or has high standards of salinization or even chemical products from the extraction site at very shallow depths, or because they store the water in containers that have been used before for chemicals associated with agriculture, which cause them to have many gastrointestinal diseases, diarrhea, malnutrition, and above all, dehydration.
Indigenous people face an appalling plight all over Argentina.
The situation is a disaster on all levels. Education, health, access to jobs, access to water, life expectancy, infant mortality, malnutrition, everything. There is no good news. What can be done? There is no long-term plan, not a short-term plan, which is what constantly happens.
The country is also struggling with the financial depression. Inflation hovers at above 50% and the poverty rate is currently at 35.4%. The country's indigenous communities, who have been economically vulnerable historically, have been especially hard hit.
In Mexico, conflict fueled by the drug trade has left tens of thousands of people in secret, unmarked graves. The families of these missing persons say the authorities have taken little action over the issue. One group of activists has turned to drone technology to address the problem themselves. More in this report.
Mexico is one of the most violent countries in the world. Since 2006, an escalating drug war between rival cartels has resulted in the deaths of over 115,000 people, as well as the disappearance of at least 60,000 others, most of whom end up in unmarked graves.
These are places where members of organized crime groups hid bodies of kidnapped and murdered people. Normally, we come to these places to search and locate human remains.
Desperate for closure, one group of parents affected by this tragedy are using drones to find as many of these graves as they can. They say northern Mexico has seen so much carnage over the years, its entire landscape is changing because of these mass burial sites.
We compare drone images with photographs from previous years and we can see the differences in the land today. Discoloration changes in the earth, constructions, mounds of stones or dirt.
This is a dangerous job. Not only do these people risk drawing the wrath of ruthless drug cartels, but also the Mexican police and military, who have often used extrajudicial methods in the country's long war on drugs. Most tragically of all, none of this has been able to put a dent in the growing power of these criminal groups.
The Wall Street stocks have tumbled, extending the deep rout in the previous session and closing the end of a tumultuous trading week. The markets shrugged off strong US jobs data as investors fixate on the economic toll from the coronavirus. The markets ignored the Labor Department report, which said the US economy added nearly 300,000 jobs in February, topping expectations. The shares of American Airlines Group and Marriott International traded lower than the forecast. The indices of S&P 500, Nasdaq Composite and Dow Jones Industrial Average went down the drain. European markets have fallen sharply as the coronavirus outbreak continues to rattle global economic activity. Frankfurt's DAX and CAC 40 in Paris have lost over 2% each. London's FTSE 100 is trading nearly 2% lower after Capita stocks slid 8%. The Cineworld shares also fell about 7.5%. In Asia, Nikkei 225 led the losses, closing over 2.5% after shares of index heavyweight SoftBank Group plunged over 6%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost over 2% after China Eastern Airlines slipped about 4%. Seoul's Kospi also lost over 2% after airlines ANA Holdings fell nearly 4%. Shanghai Composite lost over 1%. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil prices have lost nearly 2% over fears of dampening global demand. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at News.News.